Well, hello, and welcome to another edition of Ambient Talkie, a show where we dive into some weird and wacky equipment and wonderful, call it whatever you want, music. I'm Andy from Two Round Robins, and I hope you're ready for a bit of a rambling session in this episode. As Halloween approaches and the spooky season settles in, I found myself thinking about something that often lingers in my mind whenever I sit down and watch a horror film or listen to a creepypasta style podcast. That being, what makes the soundscape so darn unsettling? While horror movies are usually remembered for their disturbing visuals, it's undeniable that its auditory counterpart plays an equally important, if not even more significant role. And I'm not just talking about film score that guides the emotion trajectory of the scene, but rather the ambient soundscape that builds a world brimming with tension. As creators in the ambient music field, we tend to focus on slow and evolving soundscapes. This contrasts with the sudden, startling cues traditionally associated with a horror score. However, startling an audience is not the only technique to evoke bone-chilling fear. There's something more complex and profound about using sound to build an unsettling atmosphere. And that's something I'd like to explore a bit further in this episode. So, blockbuster horror films have a notorious reputation for relying on cheap jump scares. When it comes to sound, these are the sudden loud bangs or orchestral hits that startle the viewer before they've even had a chance to process the visuals on screen. These non-linear sounds are undeniably effective, tapping into our primal fight or flight response. Neuroscientist David Popel has explored this, noting how fear-based screams possess a specific acoustic roughness that our brain interprets as threatening. It's a primal reaction shared not only by humans, but also by animals as well. Think of those viral videos capturing eerie screams coming from the deepness of the woods. Many of these sounds turn out to be just calls of foxes, coyotes, or mountain lions. But despite knowing this, they still elicit an unnerving response. So why is that? Well, because nonlinear sounds like screams tap into something deep within us, something left over from our prehistoric ancestors. Yet startling loud sounds are not the only reason we find certain audio quite unsettling. In fact, the rise of more sophisticated art house horror films show that the atmosphere created by soundscapes is overtaking the crude shock of sudden noise that was so prevalent in the golden age of 80s and 90s horror. So what makes these atmospheric sounds unsettling? So, much like stated before, using loud jarring noises to evoke fear in one method, but as ambient artists we're more interested in creating slow-burning, atmospheric dread. Much like how our primal instinct responds to screams, we can explore how carefully constructed atmosphere plays into our fear receptors. A lot of this has to do with the uncanny valley, and that being not just in visuals, but in sound as well. The uncanny valley effect is that unsettling feeling we get when something visually appears almost, but not quite human. It's familiar, yes, but yet it is disturbingly off. This same concept applies to sound. When something familiar is altered just enough to seem strange, our brain doesn't know how to properly process it. For instance, when we hear a fox scream, right? Even if we know it's not human and probably just a harmless fox, our mind associates it with human distress, creating a blend of fear and confusion. The same can be said of eerie soundscapes that mimic, distort, and subtly alter sounds that we recognize. This manipulation of sound properties can extend to music as well. Consider the recent trend of liminal spaces, for example. Those dreamlike environments that feel eerily familiar yet eerie, creepy, and unsettling. A liminal space photograph, like an empty playground at night, for example, evokes a strange mix of nostalgia and unease. In music, you can achieve a similar effect by taking something innocent, like a lullaby, for example, and distorting that. Now, just imagine, you record a lullaby on a cassette tape. You crank up the tape hiss and play it back in half speed. The once comforting tune becomes kind of warped, transforming into something familiar, yet unfamiliar at the same time. So, if we return to the idea of liminal spaces, there's another element at play here, the fear of the unknown. Just as we don't know what might be lurking in the deepness of the woods when we hear that scream, we don't know what lies hidden in the dark corners of liminal space. This taps into one of the most primal fears of all, the fear of that which we cannot see nor understand. In ambient music, this can be kind of mirrored by the quiet sounds making their way ever so slightly above the surface, like a tape hiss that shrouds a soft plucks of a lullaby into the everlasting static. The music notes struggle to emerge, leaving the listener unsure of what lies within the static and hiss. Much like a fog-covered landscape of Silent Hill, it's concealing hidden threats. So yeah, thank you for indulging my Halloween ramblings. Instead of focusing on musical techniques or, like chord clusters or sound masses, I just wanted to explore the deeper roots of why certain sounds unsettle us so. By them tapping into our primal fears, playing with the uncanny, and creating atmospheres kind of drenched in mystery, we can evoke a sense of unease, I'm sure of it. And these are far better than, those loud, sudden sounds that are so prevalent in the jump scares. So yeah, happy Halloween, and until next time, I'm just gonna bid you a farewell and take care.